Hello everyone and welcome to the weird, scary and horrible parts of humanity. Today we are looking at the hijacking of Transworld Airlines TWA Flight 847 on the 14th of June 1985, which would produce some of the most famous images of the 1980s and became the longest aircraft hijacking in the world, lasting 17 days. TWA Flight 847 was a scheduled flight from Cairo, Egypt to Athens, Greece, followed by Rome and Italy before heading to Boston in Massachusetts, Los Angeles, California, and finally San Diego, California. It was operated by a Boeing 727-200, registration N64339. The aircraft had first flown on the 27th of August 1974 and was delivered to TWA on the 5th of September 1974. The flight flew on the 14th of June 1985 from Cairo to Athens without incident, with a new crew boarding in Athens for the Athens to Rome run. Of these 8 crew members, 7 were citizens of the United States of America and 1 was French. The crew were Captain John Testrake, First Officer Phil Maresca, Flight Engineer Christian Zimmerman, Flight Service Manager Uli Derrickson, and Flight Attendants Judy Cox, Hazel Hesp, Elizabeth Howes, and Helen Shea Hahn. Testrake was born in Ripley, New York, and joined the Navy at the end of the Second World War, serving as a flight engineer in the Korean War before joining TWA, flying on domestic runs. In the early 1980s, he began flying the Boeing 727 internationally. He was to meet his second wife, Phyllis, while on layover in Rome. A combined 139 passengers were aboard the 727, excluding the 2 hijackers. 78 passengers were American, 25 were British, 15 were Greek, 11 were Italian, 8 were French, and 3 were Australian. At 10:10 a.m, Flight 847 departed from Athens Elinkon International Airport, bound for Rome Fomuncio International Airport. Shortly after takeoff, 2 hijackers, Muhammad Ali Hamadi, aged 21, and Hassan Iz al-Din, aged 22, took out a pistol and 2 grenades, which they had smuggled through security, assaulted Derrickson by karate kicking her in the chest as the first-class drinks were being served. She was then kicked again as the hijackers kicked open the door. Hamadi had a 9mm pistol, while al-Din had a grenade with the pin removed in between his teeth. Getting into the cockpit, they both pistol-whipped Testrake and Maresca. Both hijackers took advantage of lax security at Athens Elinkon International Airport Transit Lounge, having previously taken a flight from Beirut, Lebanon. But what was the motivation of the hijackers? Well, both were members of Hezbollah and the Islamic Jihadist movement. The hijacking was orchestrated by Hezbollah and primarily coordinated by Hassan Iz al-Din, Imad Mugunya Ali Atwar, and Muhammad Ali Hamadi, whose brother Abbas Ali Hamadi was one of the commanders of the Hezbollah special security apparatus. At the time, Lebanon was engulfed in a civil war which had been ongoing since the 13th of April 1975, with the war continuing until the 13th of October 1990. The civil war had multiple parties involved, primarily manifesting from the diversity of the Lebanese population. Christians and Sunni Muslims were based around the coastal cities, Shia Muslims were based throughout southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley in the east, while the Druze population and other Christians populated Lebanon's mountainous area. The Lebanese armed forces were supported by the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, the United States of America, France and Italy, as well as the Arab Deterrent Force. They were fighting the Lebanese front, supported by the Army of Free Lebanon, the South Lebanon Army and Israel. Then you had the Lebanese National Movement, supported by Jamul, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the militant organization, the Armenian Secret Army for the Liberation of Armenia, Iran and Hezbollah. Finally, you had Syria, supported by the Amal Movement, a Lebanese militia affiliated with the Shia community and the Palestinian National Salvation Front. The war would truly destroy Lebanon, with an estimated 150,000 fatalities and 1 million people leaving Lebanon during the war. The war resulted in the Taif Agreement, which saw political powers of the Muslim reserve position of Prime Minister of Lebanon strengthened over Christian reserve position of the President of Lebanon, and the Christian to Muslim reserve representation of the Parliament of Lebanon adjusted from 50-45 to 50-50. Simultaneously excluding Hezbollah, all Lebanese and non-Lebanese militias were disarmed. However, hostilities continued between Lebanon and the PLO, with the PLO expelled to Tunis in Tunisia in 1982, with the collapse of the Israeli-backed State of Free Lebanon in 1984. Continued conflict between Israel and Hezbollah led to the Sheba Farms conflict, which led to the 2006 Lebanon War. Following the war, not only did Hezbollah gain strength across Lebanon, but the country would remain divided. Syria would occupy northern and eastern Lebanon until the 30th of April 2005, with Syria having occupied this area since the 31st of March 1976, while Israel occupied southern Lebanon from 1985 until 2000 as part of the South Lebanon conflict. But amidst all of this, where did a TWA Boeing 727 fit in, and why was Flight 847 hijacked? Well, both hijackers would demand the release of 766 Shiite Muslims from Israeli prisons, as well as the release of Hezbollah terrorists who were arrested for the bombing of the US Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon on the 18th of April 1983. This bombing caused 63 deaths and 120 injuries. At the time, it was the worst attack on a US embassy. This bombing manifested as a result of US intervention in the Lebanese civil war. They also demanded the release of the so-called Kuwait 17, who were involved in the bombing of the Embassy of the United States of America in Kuwait, as well as the French Embassy on the 12th of December 1983, which resulted in 5 people being killed. They would also demand the withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon and finally international condemnation of Israel and the United States of America for their involvement in the Lebanese civil war. The belief that this would work, according to the CIA, was primarily based on Israel releasing over 1,000 terrorists in exchange for free Israeli prisoners of war. Ultimately, Hezbollah believed that Israel would be bound to release 766 Shiite Muslims in exchange for a plane which was mostly full of Americans. The CIA also believed that the timing of the hijacking coincided with Ramadan. The two hijackers spoke minimal English, however Hamadi spoke fluent German, with Derrickson having been brought up in East and West Germany and thereby fluent in German. She was able to communicate with them and she translated their demands to the flight crew. Hamadi would tell Derrickson, "We come to die, we come to die." With Testrake held at gunpoint, the crew were ordered to divert to Beirut. The hijackers then ordered the first-class cabin to be cleared and rearranged the seating in the economy class section, with the women and children seated in the aisle and men seated at the window. Shortly before landing, air traffic control refused to allow the plane to land, with Testrake arguing with air traffic control, shouting he has pulled a hand grenade pin and he is ready to blow up the aircraft if he has to. We must, I repeat, we must land at Beirut. We must land at Beirut. No alternative. After 10 minutes of negotiating, the control tower allowed the Boeing 727 to land. The aircraft landed at 11:57 a.m. While on the ground, the hijackers asked for any passengers who were Israeli to declare themselves and stand up, but nobody did as there were no Israeli citizens aboard the flight. They also asked Derrickson to identify any passengers with Israeli passports, any passengers whose passports identified them as Jewish, or any passengers with Jewish-sounding names. However, Derrickson refused to cooperate, noting that the passports of the passengers would not have their religion. Al-Din then asked Derrickson to marry him, and she would later state that this is when she felt most scared during the entire ordeal. 19 passengers were then exchanged for fuel, with the aircraft flown to Algiers in Algeria. At 1:30 p.m, the aircraft took off from Beirut, arriving into Algiers at 3:30 p.m. Algerian officials would immediately close the airport upon the arrival of a Boeing 727. Here, 21 passengers, mostly American women and children, would be released. While there, the hijackers released their demands. However, the hijackers then wanted to head back to Beirut, but officials in Algeria refused to refuel the Boeing 727. As a result, Derrickson would offer her own Shell oil credit card, which was used to charge about $5,500 for 22,700 litres of jet fuel. At 8:25 p.m, TWA Flight 847 took off to Beirut. The Boeing 727 would arrive at 2:20 a.m. on the 15th of June 1985. However, with Lebanon engulfed in a civil war, Beirut International Airport was surrounded by a Shia neighbourhood, and there was no perimeter security, with the airport overrun by Islamist militants once TWA Flight 847 returned to Beirut a second time, with residents simply able to drive onto the runway. This time while in Beirut, the hijackers beat all US passengers who were in the military. These were Robert Dean Steffam, age 23, and Clinton Suggs, age 29, both US Navy divers, as well as 38 28-year-old Kurt Carlson, an American reserve major on active duty. Stefan was beaten with an armrest. Derrickson put herself between the hijackers and Suggs and screamed "enough, enough," leading the hijackers to leave him alone. Suggs would later credit Derrickson with saving his life. One passenger would state that they board one passenger who was a member of the US military, who was not identified, into the economy class cabin with broken ribs and tied his hands behind his back, hitting him over the head with the butt of a rifle. Stefan was beaten further, shot in the right temple, and his body dumped onto the ramp. He was shot again and died. They then asked the control tower, which was now operated by Shia Muslims, to obtain more fuel. The hijackers then released 7 American passengers alleged to have Jewish-sounding names, who were taken off the Boeing 727 and put into a Shia prison in Beirut. Due to the openness of the airport, 10 heavily armed Hezbollah hijackers boarded the aircraft to join Hamadi and Al-Din. It was at 5:40 a.m. but TWA Flight 847 would depart once again for Algiers, landing at 7:50 a.m. At 9:50 a.m., 2 women and a man were released, with Algerian officials boarding the plane and attempted, albeit failed, negotiations. By this stage, Greece had arrested Lebanese national and member of Hezbollah Ali Atwar. Atwar was scheduled to be the 3rd hijacker aboard the TWA flight, but was bumped off the flight. The Greek government proposed to the hijackers a deal while the aircraft was in Algiers: the release of 8 remaining Greek passengers, with 7 having already been released, for the release of Attar in exchange. This was agreed, with the remaining Greek passengers, which included Greek singer Demis Roussos, released and flown aboard a business jet owned by the Greek government from Algiers to Athens. It was there that an additional 65 passengers and all 5 female flight attendants were released: Derrickson, Cox, Hesp, Howes and Shia Khan. TWA would report that by this stage 53 hostages, mostly women and children, had been freed. The TWA vice president flew into Algiers to help where he could, but they proved to be of minimal assistance. At 6:50 p.m. an additional 10 hostages were freed, the Boeing 727 once again taking off to Beirut, Lebanon. It was while in Lebanon that some of the most infamous film and photographs of 1985 and indeed the 1980s were captured by the media, with Testrake interviewed from the cockpit on the 20th of June 1985 with an individual believed to be a terrorist armed behind him. Testrake, as well as Maresca and Zimmerman, were interviewed by ABC News reporter Charles Glass. It was then that the individual behind Testrake took out his gun and forced Testrake back into the cockpit. This was part of what was seen as the most sensational journalistic coup by ABC, with ABC able to interview the 3 cockpit crew following negotiations between ABC reporters Charles Glass and Julie Fint, as well as Lebanese Shiite leader Nabi Berri. However, Testrake would later confess that the situation was media manipulation in an interview with CNN's Jim Clancy. The person with the gun was not a hijacker but a teenage guard who saw the news crew and had approached the plane and asked Testrake to stage the photo in order to gain their 15 minutes of fame. Testrake rebuffed this suggestion before the teenager unloaded the gun and handed the gun to Testrake. Seeing that the individual was becoming agitated and unhinged, Testrake agreed to go along with it. The media spectacle created around the hijacking led to significant criticism of the media, with Howard Rosenberg, a TV critic for the Los Angeles Times, noting that the terrorism had become theatre. Expert on terrorism Robert Kupperman, who was interviewed on CBS on Face the Nation on the 16th of June 1985, would state that the media attention would play into the hands of Hezbollah. Inevitably, Hezbollah was able to manipulate the media attention, with CBS, ABC, NBC and the newly formed 24-hour CNN, at this stage only 5 years old, all vying for ratings. Passenger Alan B. Conwell, a 39-year-old Texas oil executive who spoke some Arabic, having lived in the Middle East for 10 years, became a representative spokesperson for the hostages. Conwell would plead with the press to have more discipline. As the hijacking continued, the AFP reported that the situation ultimately turned into something from a parallel universe, with hijackers able to move on and off the aircraft, with one of the hijackers telling the control tower, "If you don't bring us food, I'll go and get it myself from home. Tell my mother I want a garlic shish taouk." On the 15th of June 1985, Zimmerman's father, 88-year-old retired theology professor Reverend Elmer Zimmerman, suffered a heart attack and died after learning that his son was aboard TWA Flight 847. Dr. Fred Mortensen would tell the New York Times regarding Reverend Elmer Zimmerman, "He was simply beside himself. He kept saying, 'They're going to kill him, they're going to kill him.'" On the 18th of June, the New York Times reported that 40 passengers, mostly Americans, were taken from the aircraft and held in various locations throughout Beirut. However, nobody knew exactly where in Beirut they were. On the 20th of June, a news conference was held with 5 passengers surrounded by their captors, brought out to be interviewed by the press in Beirut's airport's cafeteria, with photographers even lying flat on the table to get pictures of the hostages. The whole debacle led the hijackers to take the passengers back on board the Boeing 727. By the 21st of June 2000, Hezbollah militants rallied outside the grounded 727, egged on by 3 masked hijackers on the boarding steps to the aircraft. On the 26th of June, one of the passengers developed heart trouble and was released. On the same day, Mascaro was taken off the Boeing 727, having had a spider bite 1 week before, which became infected, and his shoulder and elbow became inflamed. He was treated at the American University Hospital in Beirut and returned to the plane. Ultimately, Israel was only prepared to free the Hezbollah prisoners if they were asked to do so by the United States of America. However, Washington, D.C. refused to give in to Hezbollah. Simultaneously, Syria would need to play a role given her occupation of Lebanon, leading to a power trifecta. Following intervention by President of the United States of America Ronald Reagan and Lebanese officials, the remaining hostages were released on the 30th of June 1985. A combined 36 passengers, all of whom were male, as well as Testrake, Maresca and Zimmerman. They were collected in a local schoolyard and met with international journalists with a farewell banquet at Beirut's Summerland Hotel, which was co-hosted by ABC and the Shiite Amal militia. They were then driven to Syria by the International Red Cross to the Sheraton Hotel in Damascus, where a press conference took place. The hostages thanked the Syrian government for securing their release and simultaneously voiced sympathy for the hijackers, noting that they had all shared the same emotions for a week. Analysts in Washington, D.C. viewed this as Stockholm Syndrome. The hostages then boarded a US Air Force C-141B Starlifter cargo plane and flew from Damascus to Rhein-Main Up in Hesse in West Germany, where they were met by US Vice President George H.W. Bush, were debriefed, given medical examinations, and flown to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, where they were welcomed by President Ronald Reagan. They then flew to New York, where on the 4th of July 1985, at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan in New York, Testrake, Maresca and Zimmerman all gave a press conference. Over the next several weeks, Israel released 760 Shia prisoners, but they maintained that this had nothing to do with the hijacking, even though it was exactly what the hijackers of Flight TWA 847 had demanded. But what happened to the hijackers and the organisers of this hijacking? Well, Muhammad Ali Hamadi's family would take great joy in his participation, with his brother Abbas Ali Hamadi allegedly boasting at Ali Hamadi's involvement. He was arrested in early January 1987 in what was then West Germany, attempting to smuggle liquid explosives from Beirut into Frankfurt. The United States of America immediately requested his extradition for the hijacking of TWA Flight 847. However, Hezbollah abducted 2 West Germans in Beirut and threatened that they would be killed if Hamadi was extradited. Hence, West Germany decided to charge him in West Germany for the illegal importation of explosives. He was also charged with the hijacking of TWA Flight 847 and the murder of Stefan. But who oversaw the kidnapping of the 2 West German citizens in Beirut? Well, it was Muhammad Ali Hamadi's brother, Abbas Ali Hamadi. His trial would take place in July 1988 and last 63 days. During the trial, Hamadi would deny killing Stefan. He was sentenced to life in prison on the 17th of May 1989 by Judge Heiner Muchenberger, with Patricia and Richard Stefan, the parents of Stefan, in the court. The crew of TWA Flight 847 would testify during his sentencing. Following the verdict, Richard Stefan stated, "We praise the court's efforts and hope this conviction will stand as an example and encouragement to other countries to decisively deal with terrorists. Our family maintains Muhammad Ali Hamadi deserves punishment more severe than allowable under German law." He was held at Frankfurt's Prangusheim maximum security prison. Abbas Ali Hamadi was arrested at Frankfurt Airport on the 28th of January 1987 for kidnapping the 2 West Germans in Lebanon in a scheme to keep West Germany from extraditing his brother to the United States of America. He was sentenced by Judge Klaus Arendt in Dusseldorf to 13 years in prison on the 19th of April 1988 before being released on the 7th of August 1993 and deported to Beirut. During both of their prison sentences, the country that they were sentenced in would no longer exist, with West and East Germany becoming unified on the 9th of November 1989 following the fall of the Berlin Wall. However, in Germany, one is automatically granted the opportunity for parole, even on a life sentence, after 15 years in prison. Failing his first appeal, Muhammad Ali Hamadi remained in prison. It was while in prison that he was placed on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list on the 10th of October 2001 by the Bush administration, following 9/11. However, on the 30th of November 2005, the Landgericht Regional Court granted him parole after 19 years in prison. The German government denied that there was any relation between the release of Hamadi and the release of a German archaeologist, Susanne Osthoff, who was held captive in Iraq and had been released the week before. The United States of America expressed their disgust at his release. However, they could not extradite him because the extradition treaty between the United States of America and Germany noted that someone could not be extradited on charges for which they had already served their time. The family of Stefan expressed their anger, with his brother Robert Dean Stefan calling his release absolutely disgusting, and his mother Patricia Stefan stating, "We'll be after him, we won't let him rest." On the 15th of December 2005, he was returned to Lebanon. On the 22nd of December 2005, the United States of America requested for Lebanon to assist in the extradition of Hamadi, which was scoffed at by then Lebanese Prime Minister Fayad Siniora, stating the US could have initially asked Germany to hand him over. Why are they asking us? It would have been better to ask for his extradition while he was in Germany. He served his sentence in Germany, and there are measures of it will be completed in Lebanon. Why are they asking us now? However, the United States of America did not take this lying down, with State Department spokesman Sean McCormack stating, "At this point, I think what I can assure anybody who's listening, including Mr. Hamadi, is that we will track him down. We will find him and we will bring him to justice in the United States for what he's done." The United States of America requested his extradition through diplomatic channels on the 14th of February 2006, when the then US ambassador to Lebanon, Jeffrey D. Feltman, requested his extradition. However, this was refused by the Lebanese government. On the 24th of February 2006, he was added to the FBI's most wanted terrorist list. It was reported on the 12th of September 2006 by an administration official of the Bush government that Hamadi had rejoined Hezbollah following his release from prison. On the 12th of February 2007, the FBI announced a $5 million reward for information leading to Hamadi's recapture. The Deutsche Presseagentur reported that he was killed by a CIA drone in Pakistan in June 2010, but this was never confirmed, and he remains on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list. Imad Mugunye was accused of killing more US citizens than any other person prior to 9/11. He became involved in various attacks following the hijacking of TWA Flight 847, with the aim of getting foreign countries out of Lebanon. On the 30th of September 1985, he orchestrated the kidnapping of 4 embassy staff from the embassy of the Soviet Union in Beirut. These were Dr. Nikolai Siversky, the secretary of the consular department, Arkady Katkok, attaché to the embassy Oleg Spirin, and Valery Mirakov, who was an employee of the trade mission. They were hijacked while in official cars. Katkov was wounded while trying to escape, eventually dying of his injuries. Siversky, Spirin, and Mirakov were released. The aim of this attack was to facilitate pressure by the Soviet Union on her ally Syria to stop operations in northern Lebanon. The remaining 3 hostages were released. In February 1986, while Mugunye was in France, the United States of America attempted to capture him, but this was refused by French authorities. On the 17th of March 1992, a suicide bombing took place at the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, at the time the deadliest terrorist attack in Argentina, and it remains the deadliest terrorist attack on an Israeli embassy. A combined 30 people were killed and 242 people were injured. On the 6th of April 1992, he planned on killing Misha Tamir, a general of the Israeli Defense Forces in Lebanon, and 2 IDF soldiers. On the 18th of July 1994, the deadliest suicide attack occurred in the history of Argentina, with a suicide attack occurring when a bomb-laden van drove into the Asociación Mutual Israelita Argentina, a Jewish community. At the time, Argentina had a Jewish population of 200,000 people, the largest Jewish community in Latin America and the 7th largest in the world. A combined 86 people were killed in the attack and over 300 people were injured. Mugunye was formally charged in Argentina for both of the attacks that occurred in Argentina. In 1995, he was aboard an Airbus A310 charter flight operated by Middle East Airlines, the flag carrier of Lebanon, from Khartoum, Sudan to Beirut, Lebanon. He had attended a meeting with several Hezbollah leaders in Khartoum. The flight made a scheduled stop in Saudi Arabia. With the CIA learning that Mughenier was aboard, they attempted to force Saudi Arabia to board the Airbus A310, but Saudi officials refused, and the flight made it back to Beirut. In 1996, the US Navy planned to seize him from a Pakistani ship in Doha, Qatar, under Operation Return Ox, but this was aborted when it was not possible to verify if Mughenier was on the boat. In 1996, he was the alleged mastermind of a terrorist attack on a housing complex, the Khobar Towers in Khobar, Saudi Arabia, with the complex at the time housing members of the United States Air Force 4,404th Wing Provisional. A combined 19 US Air Force personnel were killed and 498 were injured. Mughenier also orchestrated the capture of 3 IDF soldiers in northern Israel in October 2000, as well as the kidnapping of IDF Colonel Elhanan Tannenbaum. Tannenbaum would be held for 3 years by Hezbollah. On the 10th of October 2001, he was added to the FBI's 22 most wanted terrorists with a reward of $15 million, which would lead to his arrest. This was later increased to $25 million. He also allegedly oversaw a 2006 border raid which killed 8 Israeli soldiers and saw 2 Israeli soldiers abducted during the Second Lebanon War or the July War, with Israel invading North Lebanon between the 12th of July and the 14th of August 2006. In March 2007, Interpol issued red notices against him. Simultaneously, Israel's Mossad attempted to assassinate Mughenier numerous times, however none of these were successful. In February 2008, he travelled to Damascus, Syria for the 29th anniversary of the Iranian Revolution, which took place on the 12th of February at the Iranian embassy in Damascus in the Kafr Susa neighbourhood. At 10:30 p.m, Mughenier left the party and walked past his Mitsubishi Pajero four-wheel drive. However, the spare tyre had been replaced with a high explosive which was detonated remotely, killing him at 11 p.m. Syrian intelligence had orchestrated the attack under the Assad regime. Hassan Izz al-Din remained in Lebanon, but it is known that he participated in one other hijacking orchestrated by Hezbollah, the hijacking of Kuwait Airways Flight 422 on the 5th of April 1988. A Kuwait Airways Boeing 747 which was headed from Bangkok, Thailand to Kuwait City, Kuwait. We will look at this hijacking in a future video, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of when that video comes out. On the 10th of October 2001, he was placed on the FBI's top 22 most wanted terrorists list, with a reward of $5 million leading to his arrest and conviction. It is believed that he resides in Lebanon. He also goes by Ahmed Gabayar, Samir Salwan, Syed and Nikolai Kalpakov. Ali Atwa was added to the FBI's 22 most wanted terrorists list on the 10th of October 2001 with $5 million offered for information leading to his arrest and conviction. In October 2021, he died aged 55 of cancer. Despite this, the FBI still lists him as a fugitive and on the most wanted list with the $5 million reward outstanding. His funeral took place in the southern Beirut suburb of Dayer on the 9th of October 2021, with the funeral held by Hezbollah. However, the identity of the hijackers who boarded the 727 while she was in Beirut remains unknown to this day, and they have never faced justice. On the 19th of September 2019, 65-year-old Lebanese citizen Mohammed Saleh was arrested by Greek police in Mykonos while on a cruise to Turkey. Saleh was accused of involvement in the hijacking. However, this was a case of mistaken identity and Saleh was released shortly thereafter. Testrake was largely seen as a hero following the hijacking and was given a hero's welcome when he returned to Ripley and his hometown of Richmond, Missouri. In 1987, he retired from TWA. In the same year, he wrote the book with David J. Wimbish, Triumph Over Terror, on Flight 847. He began an airborne ministry and kept flying a small plane at his Missouri home. In 1992, he gained the Republican nomination for a House seat but lost the general election. At the age of 68, he died from cancer at a hospice in St. Joseph, Missouri on the 7th of February 1996. His death made national headlines. Mascara continued to fly for TWA and would tell the Desert News newspaper that the hijacking changed how he saw life in America, stating, "I took so much that we had in America for granted." Mascara also refused to blame Lebanon for the attack, stating that approximately only 15% of the Lebanese people are terrorists, and he said that he felt sorry for them. Zimmerman continued working with TWA, and in November 1985 he wrote the book Hostage in a Hostage World, Hope Aboard TWA 847. In May 1995 he retired from TWA. He became a city council member of Cascade, Idaho, and then became council president. On the 5th of November 1996 he won election for the Republican Party to represent went the Idaho House of Representatives for District 8, Seat A, defeating Gale Wild with 88.6% of the votes. He then won the election on the 3rd of November 1998 unopposed. He left the Idaho House of Representatives on the 1st of December 2000. In April 2014, Zimmerman became a pastor of the Pilgrim Lutheran Church in Ontario, Oregon, with both of his parents Lutheran missionaries. Derrickson continued flying with TWA until the late 1980s and advised TWA on flight safety management. She then worked at an Arizona real estate firm before joining Delta in the 1990s as a flight attendant and advising Delta on flight safety management. She retired from Delta in August 2003 after she was diagnosed with cancer. She passed away from cancer on the 18th of February 2005, with her death making national headlines. Throughout her life, she never saw herself as a hero, telling the Los Angeles Times, "They threw me a hot potato, and I had to handle it." Cox would continue to fly with TWA. On the 14th of June 2022, the Association of Professional Flight Attendants would honour the crew of TWA Flight 847. The hijacking of TWA Flight 847 inspired the American action film The Delta Force, made in 1986, which stars Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin. The movie outlines an elite group of special operations forces. The TV drama The Taking of Flight 847, the Uli Derrickson story, was broadcast on NBC on the 2nd of May 1988, with Derrickson advising on the TV drama. The TV drama was nominated for 5 Emmys at the 40th Primetime Emmy Awards in 1988, but did not win any. These were Outstanding Television Movie, Outstanding Directing for a Limited Series, Movie or Dramatic Special, Outstanding Makeup for a Limited Series or Movie, Non-Prosthetic, Outstanding Single Camera Picture Editing for a Limited Series or Movie, and Outstanding Sound Editing for a Limited Series, Movie or Special. Stephan would be buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 59, Grave 430, a cemetery maintained by the U.S. Army in Arlington County, Virginia. He was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. In 1995, USS Stephan, an Ally Berg-class destroyer, was commissioned by the U.S. Navy and named in honor of Stephan. Moreover, the Robert D. Stephan Memorial Sports Complex in Waltford, Maryland, the Robert D. Stephan Educational Center, a vocational school in Pumphrey, Maryland, the Robert D. Stephan Barracks and the Training Support Center, Hampton Road in Virginia Beach, Virginia, the Stephan Memorial Navy Lodge as part of a Naval Construction Battalion Center in Gulfport, Mississippi, as well as the headquarters and a street on the base of Port Heyanumere Naval Construction Training Center near Oxnard, California, were all named after him. On the 24th of August 2010 in Yokosuka, Japan, aboard USS Stephan, he was made an Honorary Master Chief Constructionman, a Master Chief Petty Officer, by order of the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Rick D. West, with his brother Kenneth accepting the certificate and decorations on behalf of the Stephan family. On the 24th of April 2015, Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus presented the Prisoner of War Medal to Stephan's parents. The Boeing 727-200 was put back into service with TWA and retired on the 30th of September 2000, the last 727 operated by TWA, with the Boeing 727 retired by TWA. The aircraft was scrapped in May 2002. As the 1980s and 1990s rolled along, TWA struggled to stay afloat. Saddled with debt, in 1991 the airline sold its London Heathrow operations to American Airlines, moving to London Gatwick, and in 1992 went into bankruptcy before going back into bankruptcy again in 1995. The airline was reorganised as a primarily domestic airline following its second bankruptcy. However, the explosion of TWA Flight 800, a Boeing 747-131, on her way from New York John F. Kennedy Airport to Rome from Muncho Airport via Paris Charles de Gaulle, caused the deaths of 230 people, 212 passengers and 18 crew, becoming the third deadliest aviation accident in U.S. history. This reduced the public's faith and willingness to fly aboard TWA and only exacerbated the difficult financial predicament that TWA was in. By the late 1990s, most international routes flown by TWA were dropped, and in January 2001, the airline filed for a third and final bankruptcy before being acquired by American Airlines in January 2001, with most former TWA employees laid off following the 9/11 attack, which would wreak havoc across the American domestic aviation industry. The last TWA flight was Flight 220 on the 1st of December 2001 from Kansas City, Missouri to St. Louis, Missouri, with the airline absorbed by American Airlines the same day. To this day, Hezbollah denies culpability in TWA Flight 847. Thank you for watching. Please do yourself a favour and hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of when new videos come out. Also, why not hit that like button and leave a nice comment? It helps more than you know, and your support is truly appreciated. Until next time, stay awesome, stay classy, be kind to everyone you meet, have an amazing day, and remember the truth is always more interesting than fiction.